Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Wheel of Time coverage here at We Know Scripted TV. I'm your host, Taran Armstrong, and we are here today to talk about the finale of season 3. Maybe the finale of the whole show. Who knows? It hasn't been renewed yet, but we're going to talk about this finale. And with me to talk about it, of course, is Grace. How you doing, Grace?
Good, Taryn. I'm the Kara card. It's me, not you. Me. I wish
That
I
is the
drew.
Kara card.
I wish I drew dragons on my arms. I wish I did that before I came in, but I just like me. I'm the Kara card. Yeah, I'm excited to chat about the finale. I think yeah, fun episode to chat about. Lots happened.
Grace, if you're the Kara Karn, what did you see in the finale episode, huh?
I saw what everyone else saw. So
we don't speak of it. It is holy.
Yeah. All right. End of pod. Bye.
All right. Well, we're going to talk about the finale here. I think headline is, I think everyone agrees, best finale of the Wheel of Time so far. With the caveat being, that's not hard.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, typically the show has kind of been known for having not super great finales, and I feel like this is the best of the bunch. And so that doesn't really mean much overall, but we'll talk about it. I think I liked it overall. But
I did too. I think it was good. I think that it felt, again, I think from the very start of recapping this season, we mentioned that I think the biggest problem the show has is a lack of time. They're trying to fit in a lot of stuff into a small amount of space, and I think that this episode is a prime example of that. It just felt a bit rushed. But other than that, I think it was pretty good overall, I would say.
Yeah, I think that this had it had scenes in particular moments that I thought were some of the, as good as the best stuff I've seen on this show. Particularly, I think the Moraine and Rand stuff, like the two of them together, is really good. It's probably a little bit unfortunate that I do think the piece of the show that doesn't work as well is sort of tied up in the fact that there's more to tell, and if this is the end of it, like sort of as a season finale, it feels maybe underbaked to a degree. I I think some of the moving things around that we've talked about sort of ended up making the finale feel with certain stories like, oh, that's the end, I guess. And unfortunately, if it's the end, that feels extremely unsatisfying. But
be a very bad place to end the show as a whole, just given the fact that this is, very much like, I think I saw somebody say that Rafe May had said that this is like the Empire Strikes Back season. Whether or not he said it, I think it is pretty true. Like, this is very much like not a conclusion to any of these storylines. It's very, very much bad situation that a lot of them are in. Even the small victories that they have are sort of like angling towards something worse. But what we're going to do here, we're going to talk about non-spoiler stuff in the first part of this podcast, and then at the end, we'll talk more book stuff, though we will still try to be vague about any deep spoilers. This will primarily be a spoiler-free experience, if with some amount of book context, perhaps, if we feel like it's spoiler-free enough. And so you're free to listen up until the spoiler part if you don't want to hear spoilers. But yes, there's a lot going on here. Basically, we have the stuff going on at the White Tower. We have the stuff going on in Tanchico, which gets split into like 3 separate parts. Then you have the stuff happening in the Waste, which is also kind of split into a couple different parts. And that's kind of like the majority of it, but like we are cutting back and forth a lot throughout the entire episode. And I think that something that I'm discovering about myself is that I'm finding that I like TV shows that are able to be more focused. I think this like cutting back and forth stuff can really get too choppy. And it gets hard to feel invested in any one of the storylines because we're not spending enough time in any one of them. And I think that this stems from, in some part, like the books are often, a chapter is dedicated to this perspective, and then another chapter is dedicated to this perspective. So you have all these different simultaneous storylines, and in a show, you're like trying to cut back and forth between them. But in a book, you're spending a lot of time in each one, and you get invested in each one, and then it switches, and you're like, ah. In a show, when we're cutting back and forth so quickly, it can sometimes just feel a little disorienting, and it gets hard to feel like I'm in the moment with them when I'm only there for like 30 seconds at a time. And so I felt like this episode had a little bit of that problem. I don't mind the montagey end, actually. I think the ending of the episode was mostly fine. We'll talk about how I felt about like Rand's ending. But even just like the lead up to that, all of the different cuts back and forth to all of the different storylines, I just felt was a little much. But I'm excited to talk about each one because I think there's good stuff in almost every single one.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, sort of George R. R. Martin ended up like reading the Wheel of Time and was kind of like, oh, and it sort of like opened a thing for him in terms of like, I'm gonna do these chapters that are sort of focused in on one specific character. And the Wheel of Time doesn't it basically does do that. It's not quite as explicit as like literally Game of Thrones sometimes, or a Song of
It's
Ice and
not like
Fire.
a POV character necessarily. There are POV switches within chapters, but they
Right.
generally are focused on one place.
Right. And so you take what is already an epic series, but has some narrowing of the scope to it because of the way that Robert Jordan was writing, in terms of, we're following Rand or Nynaeve, or Matt or Moraine or someone, and I feel like the show to some degree is, I think it's really fair to, when you're trying to adapt it, to think, do we have to do it that way? Do we have to sort of like be with like the six characters or whatever, and the rest of them are also like sort of trying to sort of share the love? And actually, there's a thing that happens this episode, and actually has happened this season, that the reaction to that has basically been like, there are too many characters in the show, and that's actually some of the reasons things are happening that are different from the books. But I think there's still a way to do this that is more focused, and a little bit more sort of executed better, that I think the show is struggling with. And the idea that so much stuff happens. The other thing that I say a lot over this series is, the thing I sort of, my journey of reading the books, Taran, was like, sort of, I'm getting into it. I'm vibing with it a little bit, but I'm like not, I'm like kind of like, I set myself little like reading quotas, because that's how my brain works. And I'm like, I'm gonna read this much, and then I'll be done. And by the time I'm getting like 3/4 of the way through, I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna like read more. And it's just getting so good, it ramps up to something that I feel like is this excellent weaving together of stories. And I do feel like this, like, it's interesting that last episode we got kind of that big battle piece episode that was so segmented, from like, it's literally the only thing we follow through that episode. And even though I think we both agree that that was pretty good, even if it had some sort of like weak spots, I feel like what happened in this final episode is that a couple of the stories certainly felt worthy of being finale stories, and some of them didn't. And I think they're just sort of like struggling to manage this much going on, while also changing as much stuff as they are, to make it work. I still think it's pretty good, but I think that there's certainly like stuff that really resonated and stuff that is in the episode.
Mhm. All right, well let's dig into it. We can go kind of chronologically here
Yeah.
because it's a little tough to actually completely separate things out. But we started the episode with a flashback 10 years ago.
Yes.
Elida comes back from a door that is going to seem very similar to the one we see later in the episode. And we learn from Alviarin that she has come back from seeing the Aelfin, And what is this? That's weird. What are the Aelfin? What are you talking about? Is this an accepted door? No, it's not an accepted door. It's a door / portal to a different place, where she has interacted with some creatures of some sort, as we see later in the episode. And she has learned from said creatures, seemingly, that she will become the Armelin seat. And she is told to like watch out. You never know what the price is going to be for something like that. And so she at this time thinks it means she's going to become the Armelin seat now. 10 years ago, they get to the the vote, and she loses the vote. This is clearly sort of like this does a couple of things. One is that it introduces the method in which you become the Armelin seat, which is useful later when we don't need to see it. And then it also introduces the idea of there being this door and these creatures. It felt a little bit like this might have been better earlier in the season,
Yeah,
almost
100%.
like this felt a little bit crammed in. But it was interesting to see. And I guess if we're gonna do Naked Watch,
That's right.
this would have looked very different if it
Mhm.
was book accurate. They would have all been, you guessed it, naked. And I think there was some feet washing involved as well. So better this way.
Yeah, I agree that it could have come earlier, especially because I thought what was so good earlier in the season was that they didn't try to pretend that Swan and Elida don't know what the other one is doing, that they both kind of know that there's this power struggle that's happening. And so this moment that we've been like leading up to this season doesn't feel like it's that much of a surprise. And then I do feel like they do throw in a little bit of a surprise, Taran, which we'll talk about. But I definitely do think it could have been done earlier in the season, and that might have been more effective, but it is what it is. It's here as sort of the opening to the end episode. And I do actually I do think they did. It's generally the most shocking moment of the season for me is what happens in the story or in this episode. What happens later. And so I do think that uh, they did a good job in that, because I feel like they did we were seeing things as sort of you expected to see them, and then they throw one more wrench in there. But yeah.
What I liked about it is that by showing the process the first time,
Right.
it's even more of a shock when they pull the like Watchmen, like I did it an hour ago,
Right.
which I did like.
Right.
So back to real time. It turns out Samael survived his encounter with Rand in episode 6, which is not surprising. He's a Forsaken. They're pretty hard to kill, as we see later. And he has been shielded by Moraine. She has tied off the shield. He cannot seem to break it. And she says that you are going to teach Rand. This is something we will talk more about in the spoiler section. This, to me, felt like it was intentionally designed to confuse book readers. And we'll get into more detail again later.
Yeah.
But I do think this was not super working for me in the show, that this was seemingly the intention, that Moraine was like, you're going to teach Rand. Then they have the scene with Lanfear, and then they're like, let's book it out of here and just, I guess, leave him behind. Like the whole process with Samael, and he was never mentioned again. Like he's just left in this cave alone. It just felt a little overlooked to me in terms of like what these characters were thinking.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that in the book, there is a different character who shows up at this time who ends up sort of being like Rand's, magic apprentice. I guess he's not the apprentice. I guess Rand's the apprentice. Doesn't matter anyway. And so I definitely do think there's a couple of things that have done that I think are interesting to talk about in terms from like they're adapting books. So the first one is I feel like House of the Dragon gets sort of like the best of the budget, because they can do things differently, but I do feel like they've done mostly in a pretty effective way. There's certain moments I can think of where they've done this thing well enough where it can be a very fun it's an enjoyable experience as a book watcher to watch that show and see what things are different because it still could be accurate to the book. The other one I'm thinking about is Presumed Innocent, which I think added a thing at the end of their most recent season that felt was entirely done just to surprise people who had read the book or watched the first movie. And I feel like the show did too much of this probably this episode.
I mean,
Um,
I don't mind that itself. I think that just like what the end result here of, or not even really the result of it, it's more so just that like I just feel like the flow of this didn't make sense. Like why is why are they leaving him in the cave alone and then never mentioning him again? Was my
well,
main thing.
yeah, well, then they're doing that so that there's this hint of like this, I guess like I guess it's the Moraine line, I guess, that bugs me more than leaving him alone. Yeah, it doesn't really like, yeah, I feel like this whole, I mean, the whole purpose of this seems to be mostly at the, like, in terms of what actually happens, what is the point of it supposed to be, which is the reason why they leave him behind is so that eventually Mogideon, I thought this looked very cool, can like string all his entrails about. Like that's the moment they actually they want in the show. They want to get there, and they
Exactly.
just didn't do a good enough job of like figuring out how to get there. Um,
Yes,
yeah,
I agree. Yeah,
yeah, like
that was pretty much my issue.
yeah, like Mogideon or Lane for someone like saving him only to then and then Mogideon like killing him. I feel like would have been more effective than it really looks like. It makes Moraine and Rand look very stupid to
It
have
just
left the
becomes the
Forsaken.
Forsaken hangout spot.
Right, right, right.
Like Mogideon comes in, then later Lanfear and Ravine come in, and it's just like we like nothing. You didn't leave a single person there.
Yeah,
That you
yeah,
didn't have any word about it afterward. You just left to go to the thing. Yes, so a little strange, but we can overlook it. We get a breakup scene.
yeah.
Rand and Lanfear. He takes her to the place where the big thing fell, where she bore the hole, and he says that he left her, lose Theron left her for the same reasons I'm leaving you. You're petty. You're jealous. You're a monster, Lanfear. And she gets mad.
But then Egwene expels her from the dream, so it's fine. Yeah, it's fine. I mean, it's fine. I don't know that I have much to say about it. I don't know. It's fine because it has to. I guess it has to happen, but also, I wouldn't have. I guess that's the only way that they meet is in dreams. So he had to do it in dreams, and he has Egwene there. All right, I'm
Yes.
fine with it.
I mean, I think this is like an important note for Lanfear's character is that like for as diabolical and sort of as she is, um, her basically her one weakness is Luz Theron, is the dragon.
Right,
That she like in the presence of the dragon, she ultimately is what he said, just like this petty, jealous person.
right,
And she really, like I think it is fitting with her character that she really did think that she could do what she did and get away with it with him,
right,
because she just fundamentally misunderstands how a relationship like that would work.
right.
And so we are seeing kind of like the less cool side of Lanfear, which I think is important because she is otherwise so cool.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but it's her fatal flaw, you know. I think it. One thing that I sort of like went on. I went on a deep dive after this episode, which is maybe dangerous to do considering how much I've have not read basically. But I'm kind of like okay. I'm mostly pretty much okay actually with spoilers. But I mostly went in because I thought maybe one of the Aes Sedai in the election thing, the woman who was like controlling it was like, this is a bad thing to do. Don't do it if you're not me. Which is that person trans? And then I went on a long thing of being like, how do trans people work in the Wheel of Time? Like basically, like
Mm.
I went on a really long deep dive about it, and so then it was all about like souls and reincarnation. Then actually, like, is it actually when you're reincarnated? Are you actually reincarnated? Like, Rand lose Theron or not lose? And it's very compelling and interesting. I don't know how much
There
more to say
are
about that, but yeah,
there are some examples in the
yes,
books, I will say, of people who are of like souls who are put into bodies of the opposite gender.
right.
Um, so I think there would be, not that I have done this deep dive, but I think there would be precedent for that sort of thing happening.
All this to say basically was that and then I don't really actually have the answer, but I was thinking about it from the sense of like, what does Lanfear know or understand about like the reincarnation of the Dragon Reborn, and how much Luz Theron and Rand are the same person, or they a different person, and what she's trying to do, that I do think is interesting. And I actually think it's like one of the things I really liked about the season was this like and we're gonna get to like the Rand and Moraine stuff, but like that plus the Lanfear stuff I thought was really fascinating. I'm almost a little bummed that it's not there, but not in the way that it's like, this is of course the way the show has to, you can't just have them in this sort of stasis forever, so it's fine.
Yes. So I liked this, that they have like the breakup scene, and then we cut back to them like all ready to go, like essentially trying to set a trap for Lanfear, but she doesn't come. Rand says she's not this patient. She must be doing something else. And something else is that she's going to meet up with some dark friends, set some plans in motion, and we can sort of like, I think, talk about that when we get to the reveal of it. The results of it probably makes
Yep.
more sense.
Yep.
In the meantime, Mo Gideon hops over to the Forsaken Cave, and Samael's like, "Hey, what if you set me free and we work together?" And she's like, "No, no, no, you can totally do that. Let's work together to figure out how I can kill you."
Yeah, it's very funny. I like Gideon a lot. I think she's very fun.
She really, especially as like Lanfear's stock has kind of fallen because we're
Yeah.
seeing her petty side. I feel like Mo Gideon's stock just keeps rising. She's been so good this season, which is, I know I've said this before, but so wild because at the end of season 2, I felt like she seemed so over the top in a way that I was kind of disappointed by. That I was like, oh man, I thought we were getting more grounded, Forsaken this time in the show. So I was really like, kind of like, oh, I'm a little skeptical of Mo Gideon. And then she comes in and just crushes it this season. Every time she's on the screen, I'm just like, oh, what is she gonna do?
Yeah, I'm a big
So
fan.
yeah, really fun stuff. And this looked pretty brutal.
It's gross. It's incredibly gross. Just like pulling all of his little entrails, his viscera out. It's gross.
Yeah, yeah. So, they're gonna head to, I forget the name of it, Faladibala, whatever,
Uh,
the big little circly dome thing, that is going to be used to proclaim who the Karakarn is. I'm happy that we actually got to see like a bunch of people finally. Like,
uh-huh.
not like a handful, not like a couple dozen, but like some CGI or actual large amounts of people. Thank you. And I thought it was very funny on the walk there. Avienda, who has really taken a back seat this season in general, despite her really cool moment in episode 6, gets one moment with Egwene where she's basically like, "Girl, you deserve better."
Which is very funny. Yeah, but yeah, it's like you should not be with this dude, basically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Move
Yeah.
on, girl. Yeah.
um, so then we head over to Tanchico, and I think we can kind of like separate this into the 3 different plot lines here. I guess technically 4 if we're going to count the one with Mogideon and what's her name? Blonde hair.
Leandrin? No.
Leandrin,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
And sometimes names just escape me.
No.
So we first of all, we're introduced to Balefire. There's a little Tarangrial that is shooting Balefire that one of the Black Aja has. And basically, I'm sure there will be more explanation for this in the future, so I'm not going to go too deep here because I don't want to, again, spoil anything. But basically, Balefire is a type of sort of weave, type of like thing that can be done, that has some massive impacts and ramifications, as we sort of see later in the episode. It is something that these Black Aja and most people in general don't really understand. They know that it's like a big dangerous thing. They don't fully understand what it could do or the dangers of it. And so the idea that this Black Aja woman would have it and be like, "Hey, with this, I might be able to become a chosen." It's like, well, not quite, but yet it's definitely very dangerous. And so we're going to see that in use with her battle against Tom and Elaine. So maybe we can start there. Um, Always fun seeing Tom.
He's the best.
Happy he's here.
Yeah.
Uh, this is so. This is where like I think all of these individual moments worked for me, but it did do that sort of like low budget feeling thing where it was like, let's all walk into a building
Yeah.
and then split up so we can have our separate storylines, and just kind of be walking around with nobody else around. Like, how big is this building? And like, how is we're just happening to like each Black Aja member happens to meet up with the people that they're, and then they split, and the like logistics of how they split these people up didn't make a lot of like, why are Matt and Min alone? Like if they ran into a channeler and didn't happen to get the jump on them, then they would have been so screwed. Like a little strange, but we'll accept it and move on.
Yeah.
Elaine and Tom have some moments where he is talking about knowing her as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure we'll get a little bit more of Tom's backstory as we go. There's definitely some implied stuff here. Who are you, Tom Marilyn? But the important thing is that he's able to reveal this Lord Gabriel guy does not exist. I don't know why you think you've known him all your life, because I've been keeping track of the palace and the court, and this guy, no such guy.
Yeah, fun to have these two. I mean, we got them in episode. I think it's episode 6 as well, where they're they sing together, but more of a like, now we're alone. Let's catch up as we're searching for the Tangriel in this place. I like their dynamic. I like them. I like both of these actors. So yeah, this is fun, and yeah, if we sort of don't think about why they're all separated into these things and it's solely for the purpose of to develop their own individual storylines, it's fine. I like that the two of them are together, and that he's able to sort of like fill in these gaps about what's happening. It's good.
Yes. And in classic Tom Marilyn fashion, in the second episode that he, like in the episode after he is introduced, he tries to solo fight a thing that he will not be able to defeat
Yep.
and die, but doesn't, because
No.
Elaine saves him. And she takes the Terangrial with the balefire and balefires the hell out of this Black Aja woman. And you can see this visually. It's communicated visually. They may or may not get into more detail later, but you can see what happens here is that, like, basically she is unwoven from sort of like the pattern almost. And her actions that she had just taken, blowing up the ceiling above them, are undone as like the spirit like rewinds. And so very cool visual for Balefire, and I thought this was really, really well done.
Yeah, I can't remember when in the books Balefire is first introduced, but it's more of a big Rand moment. That so this is the piece that I think we're talking about earlier, where because we're trying to be an ensemble show, things get moved around a little bit, and so the introduction here is through Elaine. I don't mind the moment at all. It's interesting. Balefire has always been a thing that confused me to a degree, in terms of like, I get what it kind of does, but also if I try to think about it too hard, it breaks my brain, basically. So
It's
that's that.
it's one of those concepts that was introduced where, like, if you think about it too much, or if you like try to like think of how it could be used, it kind of breaks everything. And so Robert Jordan had to kind of be like, but they're not allowed to use it most of the
That's right.
time,
That's right.
except when they do.
I was like, don't use it. It's bad. Don't use it.
And the reason why the baddies don't use it to break everything is because it's scary.
Yeah, so scary. Balefire. Yeah, so it's fine. It looked cool. Looked cool. It's fun.
It
Fun
did.
moment. Yeah.
Yeah. We also see Nynaeve and Leandrin. Nynaeve finds the collar, does not run away fast enough. She does not take her own advice. She waits seemingly for the others and gets caught by Leandrin and thrown into the sea. She tries to say, like, why are you doing this? She's like, I know what happened to you. And this is like, I think, a lot of payoff for how much they've built up Leandrin's character here. The relationship between her and Nynaeve, I think, is really interesting. And I will say, I've seen some complaints about this. I had a similar initial thought, which is they have this conversation. Nynaeve still can't channel. She's blocked. So Leandrin ties her up, chucks her into the ocean. And I, of course, had the thought of like, really? Like you couldn't be asking more
What do you
for
mean?
her
She
to
waited
like
for the
break her
bubbles to
block.
be gone and then she walked away. That's fine.
But see,
She must
this
be dead.
actually, Grace, you mentioned it because this actually, in the moment, I was thinking this. Like, I didn't see that as I'm going to wait to see if she drowned. I actually interpreted that in the moment as, oh, this is the second time that Leandrin has intentionally spared Nynaeve.
Right.
Or like given her an
Right.
opportunity. I think that Leandrin was chucking her into the ocean to see if she could end up saving herself. And then when she didn't pop back out, she was kind of like, oh, okay, I guess she's gone then.
Interesting. I
Because
like that.
obviously she
Yeah.
could have just forehead sniped her like she did everyone else. But I think that like she does still like the reason we're building her up as a character is because we are still seeing the humanity in Leandrin. She spared Nynaeve once before, and I think she did kind of do it again here. Like gave an out for herself to have not killed Nynaeve.
All right, I like that. I like that read a lot. The one that I think I'm more mad about is Nynaeve picks the worst spot in hide and go seek and does not get caught. She just hides. She just crouches kind of behind the bed. Like what the hell? But that's fine. I like the idea. I like this of like they're like the villains looking for this thing that they don't even realize that's not what they're looking for. I thought that worked. Even if it's like Leandrin chucks the chest across the floor, and of course the thing that she's looking for spills out for Nynaeve to find. It's fine. It doesn't matter. And I do like this interpretation you have of this moment between them. I do think Leandrin, I think, is a pretty good character, and I think I've always been really taken by this. Like Nynaeve can't channel unless she's angry, and we do get this moment of her remembering when she walks through the Waygate. Is that right? The accepted
The arch.
the arch. This memory of like having a child. That's what like powers her to be able to channel and remove herself from the water. It worked for
Yeah,
me.
I really like this
Yeah.
because and I mentioned before that like I'm really glad that they're not just glossing over what happened to her in the arches. Like they're consistently calling it back. The fact that she genuinely feels like she lost a daughter,
Right.
and I thought it was really fitting for her to be thrown into the ocean, calling back to when she was on the ship and she was, hearing from the sea folk that like, the one power is like sort of the ocean. You have to submit yourself to it. And it was I just felt like I watched this scene twice and it was powerful to me both times. Like remembering that moment when she tells her daughter like trust me I've got you, carries her through the arches and walks at the other side, no daughter, and how devastating that would have been, and for that to be the moment that she's able to call back to and almost like feel like submitting in the way that her daughter did to her in that moment.
Mhm.
Like like everything's gonna be okay. Just trust me. And putting herself into the place of her daughter in that moment and just letting go and then being able to embrace the power and break through her block, I thought was a really cool moment for the show.
Agreed. I liked it.
Um, so then we also get something I was very excited for. Matt and Min have their own experience. Matt has his own experience with a different door, different little door portal, very similar to the one that Elida went through. I will say, I assume. In the books, there are two different doors. In the show, theoretically, there could be only one door, but I assume they're doing two different doors, especially because I think they specifically mentioned that Elida saw the Aelfin, and Matt, I believe, saw the Eelfin.
Correct.
Um, it would not. Do not be worried if that confuses you, because it is a confusing thing. The Aelfin and the Eelfin. One are a fox-like people. Those are the ones that Matt saw. The other, I won't spoil, but they're not quite foxy in the same way. And so he gets sucked into the portal and gets spit out on the other side. And this isn't quite how I pictured the Eelfin, but I don't really picture things in my mind anyway. So
Yeah, I was like, whoa, this this like fox creature, because it is, yeah, same. It is not what I pictured in my head at all, but I wasn't really picturing anything. It was just like,
it's
yeah,
supposed to be weird. It's supposed
yeah,
to be very alien, and I think they pretty much nailed that.
yeah. I think it looks. I think the costume and the like character design of this looks incredible. It was extremely fun. I thought this scene. So I enjoyed it. There is a thing about like, I think in the book, Matt has been to one of them and then is going to the other one and sort of gets confused about which one he had. Like, he thinks that they're all the same, basically. But for the most part, I thought that this worked. This was just, I mean, it's just weird and fun. This is fun fantasy.
Very, very weird and very fun. Very, very important to Matt as a character. And, again, we talk a lot about how each of the main kids basically get their own set of powers and stuff. And Matt's so far have been pretty. Matt, it takes a little while to grow into his. And this is a part of it. He's got these memories. He's got to be fixed. And he ends up essentially having 3 wishes granted. So if you pay attention to what he's asking for, you might have an idea of what he might have been granted. He just has to pay a bit of a price. And the price is that they're going to hang him.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing here is like, if you don't set your own, price for things, then they will do it themselves. And this way, the way he can get out is that they will hang him, and he will, hopefully not. He does not die, but that's the plan. I was a little bit. I'm not surprised that, like, obviously Min is so connected to Matt's story here in terms of like having the vision of it and then being there. I think we predicted earlier that it would be like naive. There was like some healing stuff, but this is totally fine for me in the way that this all ends up working out, that Min saves Matt.
Yes, with some very bad CPR. I talked about this when we talked about the pit, that I've been watching some Dr. Mike on YouTube, because he
Mhm.
did some reactions to the pit, see how medically accurate it was. And his whole thing is that like shows always get chest compressions wrong.
Mhm.
And so as soon as she was like, "Oh, he's not breathing," I was like, "Chest compressions, chest compressions, chest compressions." And then
Yeah,
she just starts slamming him
slamming.
with her
Yeah,
fist. And I was like, you know what? This actually kind of tracks in the world of the Wheel of Time,
yeah,
because they had knowledge of CPR
right,
at one point. It
right.
has since been degraded to the point where they are only as good as your typical Grey's Anatomy episode, I guess.
Yeah.
But very, very fun stuff. You do see that he has a bit of a medallion around his neck that was not there before. And if you are particularly eagle-eyed, especially as a book reader, you might notice that the thing he was hanging from at the top of the doorway seemed to be some sort of spear thing. I don't know if that will come into play. There's a bit more to talk about here in the spoiler section, but he has come away with some gifts for sure, as well as some memories apparently taken away. So we'll have to see where all of that goes in future seasons, if there are future seasons. Fun stuff though. I liked it.
Fun stuff. The boots in particular, I thought they're like high heels without the
Mm-hmm.
spike on the back. So cool. Looks great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we go back to the waste, and we see, forgive me because I do not remember her name either, the dark friend Aiel, who is from Malkir.
Yeah.
She
Yeah, it's okay.
walks up on Lan. And he's like, I heard you. And she essentially says, I swore my oaths, in the hopes that Malkir could rise again. But now I find myself here, and I'm about to destroy it. And so I'm not going to do that. Watch out for Lanfear. She's here. She's trying to mess with us. Um, and he says, no, if you do this, then your soul will be ripped away and you won't be reborn into the pattern, which is, I believe, a new thing for the show. I do not believe this is a thing in the books. Now, when you swear the oaths, there are some mechanisms in place to prevent you from betraying them. And that is pretty important. But this particular mechanism is, I would say, probably slightly different from how it works in the books, but and again, maybe a little bit more in the spoiler section, but I think this overall tracks, and I think it works in the world of the show, that she essentially like her soul gets ripped away from her body after betraying the oaths. I don't. My interpretation is that she was not meant to like outright kill Lan here necessarily, because why would she need to kill Lan in this moment? But more so, she just went to Lan to be like, "Yo, watch out," and then she dies.
Well, Lan helps Moraine basically not, at least not die. I guess
Yeah.
later. So killing Lan might have meant that.
Well, just
I
like
think
if Lanfear wanted to kill Lan, she could have just like popped up right behind him and forehead sniped him. You know what I mean?
it's true. This character's name is Melindra, I think. Uh,
Yes. Yes.
Melindhra. Did they do the thing in season 1 where when they go and they have the Horn of Valir, and then there's the group, and then like the Lord of that place is like, secretly I've been a Dark Friend the whole time, but actually I'm sick of being a Dark Friend, and like, do they do that in season? I can't remember if they do that, if that's just in the book. And it doesn't really matter if it does or not. I think that they don't do it in the show. I think I can't remember.
I don't recall that happening in the show.
As I said the other day, and that it was proven to be exactly true. I said somebody in the comments will tell us, and somebody in the comments did tell us. So somebody will say. I feel like in the one, it kind of bothered me in the books that there's a few times where it's like, I'm a Dark Friend, but actually I've changed my mind now. Now I'm not. Now I'm not a Dark Friend, and like immediately, which I guess I want. And I want bad people to change their mind and become good people. Again, I don't mind it because I feel like if that thing happened in season 1, doesn't matter. It's 2 seasons ago. We're like 2 seasons removed. I don't mind this moment of someone being like, I've made a big mistake. I shall sacrifice
Well,
myself and die.
yeah, basically it's sort of a thing in the books that's like, Dark Friends have been around for a long time. They've been a thing. So there are actually a lot of Dark Friends that
Right.
like swore the oaths because they were like, yeah, I want extra
Right.
powers and advantages in life. Like, what are the odds that like I'm actually going to be called to do anything
Mm.
important? Like, what are the odds that it's going to be the time that the Dark One is going to have to face off and it's going to be the last battle?
Right.
And then when it's now happening, they're like, oh shit. Like, this is not what I signed up for. I just wanted the promotion at work.
Right. Right.
Like,
Right. Yeah.
um so interesting stuff there. We get this great scene with Rand and Moraine that is I think
So
so good and so interesting. That he essentially is like, you've been working with Lanfear too, essentially, and you wanted to separate me from doing all these things. Thank you. Because he recognizes that she is the only person who cares more about like the mission essentially than anything else, and that is how he feels at this point too, especially after what happened with the little girl. And so they have such an interesting dynamic here where like he is able to, and especially like this happens in the books too. Over a long period of time, he constantly chafes under her manipulation, and then eventually finally comes to the conclusion that like, no, I think that we're actually aligned. I think that that you are the only person that I can trust, because you are the only person who has shown time after time that you are dedicated to this in the same way that I am. And so I think also to then see the performance here, where Moraine is just like so grateful to have been recognized because she's been doing this for 20 years with no thanks from anyone. Constantly, run into people who are like upset with her, mad at her, doubt her, whatever. For her to get some recognition was such a cool moment.
Yeah, I feel like there's just so much more time in the books that we get. The one like thing I remember reading like basically every chapter that has any Two Rivers focus, like, oh, the Aes Sedai are so annoying, and specifically Moraine is so annoying that she's making us do all of this stuff, and specifically Rand, because you get the most Rand perspective of just how annoyed he is that he feels like he's and this dynamic is basically a mother and a teenage son of like, I just want to be independent and do my own thing and live my own life, and now Rand kind of becomes, a lot of, not everybody, but some people have this moment where you're like, oh man, my parents were probably actually really right to do all this. They told me to do all this stuff when I was a teen, and I just love this scene between the two of them. I think specifically the acting that they're both doing is phenomenal. On top of the actual story that they're telling, it's very very good. I enjoyed this.
Hmm. And then we see, of course, that Swan has sent out her most trustworthy sisters to go and stop Elida, who has sent 8 red sisters out of the tower. That's the amount that you need to gentle a man, and that means that theoretically that she has gone rogue and she's trying to cut Rand off from the one power, which would be devastating. So she sends off her most trusted sisters to go stop them. And when they do, they realize it's a trap. They have been sent away to prevent Swan's allies from being in the tower. And as she tries to get into sort of like the central room place,
Mhm.
Elida pulls the I did it an hour ago. You have been deposed. You have been sentenced. You will be stilled, and you will be questioned. And we see that she is. They didn't go into a ton of detail here. We have talked about this before on the show. It's there's a lot more detail in the books about it, but basically the one power, her ability to channel the one power is ripped, torn away from her. This is an irreversible process, and she is now powerless. And you see that in her performance, which I thought was so phenomenal in this episode. That the second it's done, she just looks hopeless and lost, and just so good.
Yeah, so there's a thing in the books that this idea that no woman has basically like ever been able to live having been stilled. So
I
right? Is
believe
that right?
you can live
No, no.
after being
Yeah, so
stilled,
isn't the
but
idea you
many
don't
of
want
them
to?
many of them don't want
Yeah.
to. And so basically after a woman has been stilled, you usually have to like kind of put them on watch, so that they don't harm themselves,
Yeah.
because many of them do end up taking their own lives.
So that's what I was gonna say, and I was like annoyed that they didn't do enough to set up this idea, like that this is a thing that can happen. That because we've seen it with like they do this to Logain
Mhm.
earlier in the show to a
That
man,
is
but
that
not
is
to
where I think, like, in the show you're supposed to have learned it via Logain mostly, when we see him in season 2 and he's like just a mess.
right. But then when we see what happens, I'm like, oh, it makes sense to not have done. Like it makes sense to not have like set it. Like now that suddenly doesn't it doesn't matter
Mhm.
because
Yeah, she
of what
dies anyway.
guys. So we're setting up this whole thing of like, it almost, yeah, it doesn't make any sense actually. So it's one thing I'll forgive the show. This is a moment that I feel like I love Swan as a character. I am very much invested in her story in the book as well. And so like even knowing what's happening, being like don't send all those people out to go get, like, it's a trap, you fool. It's like, yeah, it's tough. It feels very
This is
it feels like Ned Stark in Game of Thrones. You're like,
mhm.
don't stop being the way you're being. Just cheat or something, But it is.
This is very much one of, like, the big moments that stood out to me in the books
Yeah.
of like just how infuriating it is that Elida wins.
Yes.
And there's just nothing that can be done about it. It's just so frustrating.
Yeah.
And I think only further, like, only continues to be frustrating, like, as you know, we exist in our time at the moment, and like how things tend to operate in the real world as well. But very, very, I think, well done scene. I think for the time allotted to them in like this episode in this season, I think that overall this was really, really well done to this point.
Yeah, it's funny because now that we're talking about I almost like every single thing actually does maybe feel like finale worthy material. So I'm wondering, this is the example of like the sum is lesser than the parts, whatever that expression
Yeah,
is.
yeah, the total is, or yeah, it is lesser than the
Yes,
sum of its parts.
yes, yes. Because I feel
I
like each
agree.
individual thing I like, but yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Like, all of these pieces are so good. It's just like the way that they were put together was just felt so rushed that it didn't really allow them to breathe enough to really appreciate them. I think in the moment as much as they should have been appreciated is how I felt. But this sort of leads us into this end montage, where Swan is brought out for her questioning. She's been tortured clearly, and begins her speech. What is the truth? The truth is that I love Moraine. And as she's speaking, we get this battle between Moraine and Lanfear. Uh, and Rand is busy dealing with the like proclamation of being the Kara Karn, because Lanfear has set a bit of a trap for him there, where she has given Cúladan the dragon tattoos on his arm so that he can proclaim himself the Kara Karn. But he didn't watch the movie. He doesn't know what happens at the end, so it's a little hard for him. Also, he can't channel, which is a huge disadvantage.
yeah. Huge disadvantage. That one feels worse to me because at least with the other one, everyone is being like, we never say what happens. People can't handle it. People shouldn't know. But it fits perfectly with this idea of like, no, I'm here to destroy this. Like, I'm going to destroy, you know, I'm going to destroy the Aiel before, and so that you might say that I do that by telling them all their worst fear, that like this is where we came from. So this scene is, I think, is really excellent. It feels pretty fitting of the finale. I think this entire moment here, the Swan stuff, brutal. The work that they did, like the makeup work to make her look as like tortured as she was brutal, and then a genuinely stunning moment that she just dies, which probably talk more in the back half about. This is different. There's just more to dive into there, but generally stunned me, and I was very sad.
This
Taran,
speech was great. I
yeah, so good.
really, really loved her performance here. The way that she says, "I defy you, Elida. I defy you," was so good. But she has been sentenced to death. She is beheaded, seemingly.
Oh, it's
Um,
yeah, brutal.
and this was a little bit of a thing that people were like, well, how did Moraine know? Um, and the conclusion that I've seen the most is that she has been released from the oaths that she swore on
Yeah,
the oath rod
yeah,
back in season one. And I think season one. And that I think is the truth, especially because on the previously on, they specifically showed her swearing that oath in the like previous on section, which I think was surely meant to imply that this is part of that. Basically, she's now been, because remember, she swore to Swan specifically, not the Armelin Sea, not like the tower. And so she has now been released from the oaths that she swore to Swan, and knows that the only way that could have happened is if she died. And so she's pretty sad about it.
yeah. I thought we were gonna get one of two in the like in the Amerlin seat, like where Swan dies. I thought we were gonna get some reference to the like, so like when she's like, and now I'll tell you what, and she said, Swan's speech. I thought we were either gonna get her saying something along the lines of like, um, I'll tell you the truth, even though now I don't have to, or that a lot of would use it as basically like, well, this can't actually be the truth, and then we do, but we don't do it, and then I actually think to some degree, like, it's what sometimes I feel like I worry about things that I don't need to worry about because I'm like, oh no, but the person who hasn't read the books is not going to understand this. But ultimately, I think the show is like trusting in its audience enough. It's a little tricky for a show that you basically like shouldn't Google about, because there's so much you could spoil yourself on. But yeah, the moment that Moraine's reaction to obviously what happened, that makes complete sense to me.
Yes. And yeah, she says, I'm an Aes Sedai, so this is the truth. Yeah, there are a couple of like caveats to that. One is that if she was Black Aja, she would be able to lie.
Right.
And the other is, I believe if you've been stilled, you can now lie. I think you've been released from
Yeah,
your oaths.
I think that's what I was. So yeah, that's what I was sort of referring to in the sense that like a lot of she might either say something
But
along the lines of like, I don't have to tell the truth, but I'm going to anyway, or that Alida would use it as like your argument is invalid
yeah,
because
but I mean, the reality
it
of it
doesn't matter.
is that if she was Black Aja, she would have been able to lie anyway. And if she wasn't Black Aja, she
Right.
wouldn't have been lying, whether or
Right.
not she was bound to the oath rod. So,
Feels like a
um,
blood on the clock tower roll.
yeah, yeah. um, Great stuff here. Moraine ends up with Lan sort of defeating Lanfear with the power wrought sword that they mentioned early in episode 1 of this season. Slice of the neck, which was, I think, a nice little callback to all of the visions of Moraine getting her neck sliced by Lanfear, but she jumps away before she can properly die. We see that a couple of things happening here. One is that we've seen many times in the season and in the show, you cannot heal yourself with the one power.
Right.
However, and we've seen reference to this, there is another power. It's what Lanfear was talking about back in the visions from Meridian, that she was, searching for this other power that anybody could have access to that is not specific to gender. This is called the true power, and it comes from the Dark One. That is the black stuff. So there's a couple of things. The one power we see, like Moraine wielding all of the Aes Sedai. Rand also wields the one power, and we see it in the scene as he makes it rain. But his has this like black, these black tendrils and clouds attached to it. That's the taint that the Dark One has put on the male side of the one power. That is what broke the world, because all of the male channelers went mad and just started blowing stuff up. And then we now have another visualization, which is a pure black power. That is the true power, comes straight from the Dark One. He grants it to people at his will. And it is very, very powerful, and it is not gender specific. And we see it like fill up her eyes, and that is how she's able to sort of fend off Moraine using the Sukarnan. And that is also how she's able to heal herself. However, seemingly, the cut from this sword seemed a bit difficult for her to heal with the true power. And so theoretically, this slice to the neck should be pretty damaging, pretty bad for her as she jumps away.
Moraine says she died, so
Well,
supposed to be dead.
I interpreted that to mean that she was talking about Swan.
Oh, yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
I don't think anybody thinks that this is the end
great.
of Lanfear, because we did not see her die. She jumped away.
One thing I just want to say about all the stuff you just said, which is it's all cool. It's just cool. It's just cool fantasy, stuff. It's awesome. The second thing is I thought it looked great in the show. I thought I thought the CGI for the stuff, I didn't really, notice anything that I thought looked particularly awful. I thought Lanfear's sort of like thunder thing was really cool. She does it a couple times where she like shoots these like this like sort of in succession bolts of like thunder. Basically all of it looked really good. The Rand stuff as it's circling around him and starts raining, that it all looked really great, looked really cool. It's fun to see it on TV.
Yeah, and so like these like battle scenes, I think have generally been the worst. These like big set piece things have generally been the worst part of the series so far. I don't think this was like a perfect fight scene between the two of them. I think that it's a tough thing to do. First of all, we've talked about this before, dealing with the power levels, which is always a tricky thing.
Mhm.
But then you're also dealing with like if you can just squash someone out of existence with the power, and there's all these different things you can do with it, like how do you really depict
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
battle between two people that isn't just throwing power at somebody and then them shielding themselves? And then
Right.
also, like, how do you have Lan in the middle of that
Yeah.
without
Yeah.
that feeling a little strange? And we do get a couple of moments that I thought were clunky, particularly when like Moraine pulls the sword out of herself and there's like it felt like 30 seconds almost, and it wasn't, but it felt like it, of Lanfear just standing there like,
Yeah. I know.
what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, you're still pulling the sword? What?
Yeah.
Okay, now you're attacking me, shield.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
um, I also thought that the Rand stuff here was a little clunky. I liked seeing how many Aiel there were. It was a little strange to me that, like, in this world, apparently, when the Kara is there to like proclaim himself, uh, only the front row people can see anything.
Yeah,
So-
I'm the thing for me that I feel like the book actually does a really good job of setting up. I feel like, and they did this, like they just didn't do, and I get it. There's too much going on, but the idea of like a Aiel civil war, essentially, that like they're not, that these different clans will have different ideas of what to do, and I feel like this moment happens as Rand is making a speech, and a lot of people think he's a liar. And then he shows his two, symbols, and then suddenly there's like a literal like split where like like there's like the Aiel on different sides. I thought it was maybe a little, I don't know, just didn't really work.
this
But
this I think was the most rushed feeling
yes, I would
thing.
agree.
And just didn't quite work for me. Uh, just really like Couladin just didn't work for me. Like this is the weird like open shirt and like I don't know. There's something about visually it just didn't work. And then it just felt a little strange. It felt like this was like a rap battle when Rand like walks down the steps and he's like, nah, I'm going to quote the prophecy. I fit it better. And I don't know. It just felt a little off. It felt a little rushed, and honestly, a little confusing in terms of like what we were supposed to be interpreting from it and what the crowd reaction was supposed to be. Cullinan ends up just kind of like walking away in the middle of it, and I don't think you. It's hard to like I think properly interpret what happens there, and then I think you're supposed to think like, oh, is Rand gonna kill all of them? But then he ends up making it rain, which like I I don't know if that really lands for you if you're just watching the show. Like oh, I guess he's making it rain, and that's cool. It's because water's a thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess to show off like how much power he has. It certainly. I mean, if the moment is supposed to be like the thing that I talked about before, like we didn't really talk about this, but the random Moraine scene where he's like, "I want you by my side," and she's like, "Absolutely not. That's a bad idea. You got to be the one to like gather your army." And she's basically like, "I know you will be able to do it." Yeah, I feel like maybe the execution here of like that thing in particular doesn't work. This is probably again to talk about the things like the main theme before of there's a lot going on. They're not focused in enough. It does feel like sometimes you probably spend in the books too much time with Rand. Some would argue that we spend too much time focusing on like one specific storyline. But then, if the purpose is about the Dragon Reborn, makes some sense probably that we might have spent more time. Like the most we get about Aiel culture is basically the moment they come to Ridian and there's the disagreement, and then the like thing with the kid basically in that film. Like we really don't, like the Ridian stuff, we get all the backstory, but we're not in the like, but what's it like now? Like they do such a good job of setting up um the why they are the way they are, but then we don't actually like live in that for probably long enough to make this moment of him convincing everybody to join him to like working, I think.
I think something that might have helped the performance here too would have been like if they had done like a like let's amplify his voice with the one power sort of thing
Mm,
instead of like the yelling, which I wasn't quite working for me. But we do sort of end on I think a little tease of like is he a little bit
yeah.
mad here?
Yeah.
We see a brief glimpse of him like seeing somebody in the distance earlier, and then they're not there. And then at the end, when everyone is kneeling, Egwene does not, and she says, "Rand, please let it go." And she kind of just doesn't respond.
We had somebody, and I won't be able to find this now, whether it was on Instagram or YouTube or whatever, but somebody who like said the show has done some stuff to hint about this madness,
Yeah.
which is really interesting. And yeah, I like this last I like the last moment a lot.
Well, I think there's plenty to talk about in the spoiler section, so we should probably jump into that now. But if this is where you're going to bounce out, thank you for joining us all season long. I hope you
Yeah.
enjoyed the podcasts. We will be spoiling some things. Because there's a lot to talk about here, I'm going to be, I think, even more vague about late game stuff. And a lot of what we're going to talk about is specifically like some of what we can expect to see in season 5,
Yes.
season 4, sorry, if it
Season
happens.
4. Yeah.
And some of the things that were changed specifically in this season, which can give you some amount of hint of like where the story might eventually go.
Right.
But in general, I think this is probably one of the safer spoiler sections to listen to. But proceed at your own caution. Thank you again for joining us all season long. And
Yes.
Grace, let's talk about some spoilers.
Let's do it.
Lews Therin, right? That's what we're talking about. Rand in the books sees and hears Lews Therin a lot. We've been getting hints. We've talked about this a little bit already, that like we've been hearing whispers. We've been hearing his name. I would imagine that is who he is seeing out in the sand dunes. And I have to imagine that we are going to be seeing more of him in future seasons, especially he's been cast already. Like we've seen him in the show a couple times already. So it would make a lot of sense for him to just pop up and start talking to Rand. And I think that can lead in really cleanly into the prologue finally being introduced into the show, perhaps as a bit of a reveal. Like maybe we're introduced to Lews Therin as like this sort of like, maybe Lews Therin, if we're talking about Samael, maybe Lews Therin becomes a little bit of Rand's teacher. And we come to think of Lews Therin as somebody who's trustworthy, only to eventually discover that he murdered his family. So like, I think there are things you could do here that work really well with all of the theming and with everything that happens with Rand and Lews Therin in the books.
Yeah, the comment I was about to say, I realized how quickly I was getting into like, spoiler territory. But they've basically done this before, where there are two different ways I think they've shown people seeing and imagining somebody. So you imagine that that's how they can sort of do it. The other thing I thought I was thinking about this episode was when Lanfear has to like leave and she's like gets shunned and she's going around, and I was like, I forgot how much like disguising there of like people being other people in the book, that you basically like, it's really difficult to make that translate into like a show where you would have a different actor, but you don't want to like not
in the
have
show,
Natasha.
it's just
Yeah, it's just like hood up. Yeah, which is so funny. I was thinking about this episode as Lanfear is like both supposed to be in disguise. It's, I think, just when she goes to see Samael that I'm like, she probably would be in disguise in disguise for this, but she's not. But yeah, I think there are ways to do it. I think that last shot is like tremendous in the way that this is the theme of again, like I do feel like, if we could focus a little bit more on Rand, which is funny because I actually get quite sick of Rand in the books. So there's a tough balance here. But yeah, this to me is of like, as he's supposed to save the world, is he going mad? It's extremely fun, and I feel like the last shot is perfect.
Yes. So speaking of Samael, we talked a lot all season long about like, is Asmodean going to show up? Is Samael going to replace Asmodean? This felt very clearly intended to like trick us.
Yes.
As he's caught and shielded, and Moraine's like, "You're gonna teach Rand," and I was like, "All right, here we go, Asmodean 2.0," and then he dies, which implies to me, again, that perhaps Lews Therin himself could kind of take up this role in the show. Perhaps, as speculated before, Asmodean does still exist in this world and will still be Rand's teacher at some point. And this was just a teaser to show that they are looking for a teacher, and he will perhaps show up as somebody that can make that happen. Or they can still kind of go back to Logain to some degree, but that feels played out at this point. But it tells me the idea of there being a teacher still must exist somewhere in this show, and therefore Asmodean maybe not as dead as we thought.
Well, so there's two. I feel like there's two death fake. Well, there's actually kind of three, which is I think we were like, okay, Samael will have lived, and then he'll become like a teacher for Rand. So we're doing that. Like, nope, we're not doing that. And then obviously everything we get with Swan and then Moraine eventually, I feel like is a bit of a fake out. As well. Can I tell you the one thing I don't think I've ever really said this, and I always think it sounds silly, but I'll just finally say it, which is that one of the things I like about the number of Forsaken is that it's 13 and it's an unlucky number, and then if there's going to be less, then it's not it's not 13. And I know that that's very nitpicky, but that's the thing I'm annoyed by. So
I'm so happy it's less though.
yeah, fair
Especially
enough.
because and I'm happy they took Sam off the board too, because he's such an uninteresting character in the show. But like every single one of the Forsaken to me is so interesting on the show.
Right.
Between Lanfear and now Mogideon, and Ravine is so interesting, and of course Ishi was great when he was around. So I'm like
That's
every
fair.
single one of them is so intriguing, and I'm really happy about that. But yes, we get a bunch of these like things. I thought that Tom was going to die for a second there after what they did to Loyal. When Tom was like, "You go back and save your mother," and I was like, this guy's barely been in the show. I could easily see them killing him off now.
Yeah, so the thing that I said that perhaps the Loyal death was to set us up for character death that we weren't otherwise expecting, which is a little bit seemingly what happened here with Swan. I think I'm just personally sad about it. I think if you do look at like how they would make her story work, they basically like moved too much around for it to basically make sense, to do it. So that's surprising. I also think it does work as sort of we've been sort of like expecting potentially Moraine to at least potentially die, and I feel like the show sort of inverting that, I think it's actually fine for me, even though I feel like I'm feeling there's a little bit too much like I feel like they're trying to play to the audience rather than just tell the best story possible sometimes, but I'm mostly fine with this like swap of Swan dying instead of Moraine at the end of the episode.
Yeah, I mean, Loyal came out of nowhere because I don't think anybody sort of saw that coming. Swan, I think we already talked about, like, this was definitely a possibility for the show. She doesn't have a huge role moving forward. She just has a bit of an arc as a stilled kind of Aes Sedai, and eventually, has like her own separate romance, which they're clearly doing away with. They're making like Moraine and Swan like the thing. So I think this makes a lot of sense. I was thinking this might happen, and I was also expecting like there's a really cool way that they can have both Swan and Moraine die here, like at the
Yeah,
same time. Like, what an end to their story.
yeah,
I think the reason that doesn't work is that you can't actually have Moraine dying. It's Moraine's death is not a death, as so to speak. So it didn't. The mirroring, I don't think, would have worked very well. Um, I was very much expecting the like jump away to
me
happen,
too. Yeah,
and it did not. So that tells us a couple of things, a couple of potential things. One is that maybe, as speculated, Moraine just sticks around for a while. Maybe she replaces what's her name? Geez. Um, the other one that basically replaces Moraine in the book for a while. Who's I
see, I'm
never
not there
let me
yet, I don't think so.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
she's I don't like that character.
fair enough. Um,
She's
the other thing too is that they seem like if they're coming back, if not the like I don't know if we'll get the full next season, but like the whole idea is like to go and get to the Stone of Tyr. So we're doing that, and Moraine's around. Like it will be kind of
Cad's Swain.
interesting, and yes, it'll be interesting and fun to kind of like think about where they're gonna end up still condensing things, knowing that there's so many books left. Like they've basically only, for the most part, put two books into one season. Is basically what they've done, except they took out a bunch of a previous book and and have basically referenced on the show, like he's gonna go get Calendor, and Moraine's around for that. So Yeah.
Yes, and so I think there is also an alternative, which is that Moraine and Linfear both are around for another season,
Right.
and what happens to them here ends up happening in Tyr
Right.
instead,
Right.
because they did swap the chronology of that, and because we have introduced the Elfin and the Eelfin already, like that storyline still makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
and it makes sense to have done it this way so that they can do it, so they can have that like thing happen, and then they can only be they you can have them be gone for a shorter period of time, I think, as well, um, where you could even have maybe some like the season that they are quote unquote gone,
Yeah. Yeah.
like a
100%.
couple of cutaways, or who knows, there's all kinds
Yep.
of things you can do,
Yep.
that still sticks to the original story there. So, one thing people were a little upset about, Nynaeve versus Moghedien did not happen. I'm glad it didn't happen here. I think it would have been too soon. I think that the way that they've built Moghedien up, and the way that they've now unblocked Nynaeve, I think like holding off on that makes a lot of sense, and I think will be way better in the future.
They've also done some pretty good prep work here with like Leandrin and Moghedien
Yeah.
have scenes, and then like they've all had Nynaeve hasn't seen Moghedien again, right? Since she was like
Well, she
um
technically hasn't seen Moghedien at all, right?
at all. Yes. So I think there's a lot more to play there with
Yeah.
as well. So yeah.
Um, So, in regards to the Dark Friend Oath, I'm going to be very cagey about this because
Mm-hmm.
this plays into honestly maybe one of my favorite scenes in the entire series
Mm.
and my favorite character probably in the entire series. It has some implications here that I think are pretty easy to get around to maintain the integrity of that scene, and so that's probably all I'll say about it. I think I've seen some people talk about this like, oh, does this break this thing? I don't think it does. I think it still works, and I'm excited, hopefully, to see it at some point.
Okay. Fun.
Um, Matt. So obviously, the big change here is he now has holes in his memory after going to the Eelfin. Um, I imagine what's happening here is that he will eventually go to the Eelfin,
Mm-hmm.
to get his answers to things, and that will fill in the memories, and then we'll have his whole general knowledge stuff pop
Yep.
back in, and that'll be a whole like season arc. The bigger question for me is the Ashandarai, which is at the door. Like they didn't do anything with it in this episode, and they've already sailed off. So like, how do you then? Are you gonna like at the start of season 4 be like, oh yeah, and also this thing was there? Like, I'm confused about that.
Yeah. It's funny because uh well, there is a way. Okay, so I was thinking about my answer, and then I came up with a solution, and then was excited by my solution. So let me slow down for a second. Which is, it's funny because in a show where so much happens, like it's funny that they have to cut something. So the world where they like film a scene where he has it or whatever, or like takes it or whatever, like definitely they could have filmed it and they just didn't use it for whatever reason. And then it's like, why would you cut that? I mean, this episode is 109. I definitely think they could have gone longer, probably. Like, so it seems silly that for something that like, if it's going to be important, why wouldn't they have done it? Unless they just
But
didn't do it.
it feels like there was a pretty obvious place to have like the Black Aja woman wake up and then try to channel at Matt, and then he like has to fight back, and he like grabs the thing from the door and like slices her or something. Like, I don't know.
Um, Matt's got in trouble for taking things before, right? That's the whole thing with the ruby dagger in season. So this idea that you could have him like he's hidden it somewhere, like
Mm,
later you could, I think you could just do, um, and it's
like,
I
what are
think
you
this
doing with that?
I think
Like, you
it's
were hung from that thing.
yeah, I think
Like,
it's
it's
easy to
cool.
I think it's easy to show a scene in the beginning of season 4 where he lifts the blanket up under his bed or whatever. It's like there, he lifts the mattress up and it's there. So, I don't know. I think there's a way you can do it that
Mm.
I honestly kind of understand if so much you have to cut probably some things, which unless they literally are not doing anything with it, in which case, I I, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah.
I think the holes in the memory thing again works really well because it gives them a lot of incentive to like go through the door the next time, to be like, I want my memories back, essentially. And then, you know, I mean, technically, that's I don't think how that should work with that one,
Yeah.
but I think it's fine. There is this idea potentially that like the difference between the two doors won't be as pronounced, given that Elida seems to come out of the Aelfin door with like a thing that she's. I don't know if she got it from them or if that was something she already had, but um, you know, interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting stuff.
Yep.
I do think you were alluding to this as well earlier that the Avienda scene with
Yes.
Egwene was
Yeah.
very funny
Yeah.
because she's like, "You deserve better," and it almost sounds like she's talking to herself
Yeah.
based
That's
on what
right.
she saw in Rooted.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, it's going to be like, girl, you gotta get over it because, like, I know who's gonna marry Brandon. It's not you, but it is me. It is secretly me and
They are
other people.
still leaning
Yeah.
heavily into the Min and Matt stuff to the point where like there is a small part of me now that is wondering like, are they just going to
Well,
section Min off from
well, yeah.
this?
That's not the. I've always felt a little bit like, and I'm not really there in the books either, but like, it always Min has always felt to me the one that made and it's just because it comes later, you know. And I'm kind of like this person who like I'm a little like because I'm so used to the way stories like these tropes, I'm like, actually, shouldn't Egwene and Rand be together? Like they're like basically high school sweethearts, you know. But that's not what the story is. There is a world where like, is that a lessening of this like the thing that they might be worried about in terms of Rand having like multiple wives? Is it just it's like sort of a this love triangle type of thing? Maybe that feels in a post Challengers world. Maybe that feels like it makes more sense.
Who knows? Who knows? But listen, I think the main thing is that you know, I just hope we do get more. it's
I
this
know.
I despite the flaws, I really do enjoy watching the show, seeing all these things play out. You know, maybe not in the way that I originally imagined them, maybe not in the way that they happen in the books, but like in interesting ways that I get to sort of dissect and analyze. And so uh, I think overall, as we've already said, best finale of the bunch so far, best season of the bunch so far. And I did enjoy both season one and season two. I think season two in particular had some really strong arcs. So it's actually not like a given that I would have said season three is stronger. In fact, I think the finale probably is what tips the scales for me. So yeah, I just hope it comes back, Grace. I want to talk more about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this episode had its highest, like the highest, or this, yeah, she said the highest high of the show overall, which is episode 4, is just like the watermark of the show so far. I definitely do feel like the thing that is most holding it back is unfortunately the thing that probably won't be fixed, which is that the show just doesn't get enough time. 8
Mhm.
episodes is a lot for an epic of this size, because I feel like if you kept everything in but expanded, mostly for me, like a lot of the Rand stuff, I feel like the show feels a little more balanced in the way that I think it could be. So I don't think that that will change. I'm not like I'm mostly just hoping it gets renewed. So if it gets renewed for an episode season, I will be happy enough. If it doesn't, I will be disappointed. But I will not be not exactly holding my breath. But it does seem like it got some momentum in terms of like viewership this season. The toughest thing about the show is the fact that the longer it goes on, the harder, the more of a thing it feels like to like start it and watch it, like so I don't know. We'll see.
We will see indeed. But that is what we have for you for now for the Wheel of Time season 3. If you want to continue to hear us talk about shows, we just started our deep dives of The Last of Us, which aired its first episode of season 2. This last week, we'll be talking about episode 2 in just a few days. So make sure you check that out if you're interested in watching The Last of Us. We also have a podcast called The Tastemakers, where we talk about all of the new shows that are happening in a spoiler-free way, talking about like what's worth watching, what's not worth watching, and just general sort of analysis of the news and all of that stuff. So very, very fun podcast over on the Tastemakers. Check that out. We talked about The Pit recently. We're going to be talking about Andor in just a couple of weeks as well. So tons happening, Grace.
Yeah. I wrote a little bit about Wheel of Time this season, talked with many of the cast over on parade.com. Check out more of my work over there, and everything else that Taran said. We're doing a lot here in RHAP, from TV. I released a 15-minute review of Black Mirror season 7, which you can check out as well. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us all season long, and we will see all of you next time.